Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera. I want to thank you for tuning into my podcast. You have a lot to choose from, but you chose mine, so thanks. Just want to remind you to follow me on socials at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content, anywhere you get your podcast, and on social medias where you can like and follow and be notified of when new episodes drop. On today's episode, my next guest is a culinary trailblazer who proves that you don't need formal training to create magic in the kitchen. She's the mastermind behind Well Plated, a wildly popular hub for mouthwatering recipes and meal planning inspiration. What began as a personal blog in 2012 turned into a full-fledged career by 2014, and she hasn't looked back since. Her first cookbook, the Well Plated Cookbook, became a runaway hit, selling over 130,000 copies and racking up more than 3,700 glowing 5-star reviews on Amazon. Now she's back with her highly anticipated follow-up, Well Plated Every Day, which launched in October of 2024. This book is packed with easy, healthy, and family-friendly recipes designed to bring joy to even the busiest weeknight cookers. Get ready to be inspired. Please welcome to the pod, Erin Clarke.
So happy to be here.
Oh, glad to have you. Did I get everything correct on the intro there? Did I miss anything?
No, I mean, you did a great job. You can just come around with me and be my PR.
I'll be your hype man. We'll just follow you
I love
around.
It. Always need those.
So I kind of want to, before we get into the second cookbook here, I kind of want to talk about a little bit of your background, how this all kind of came about, how this turned into this kind of mini empire, or not mini, large empire called Well Plated. So what initially inspired you to start Well Plated as a blog to begin with?
Well, when I started blogging and dinosaurs roamed the earth, there were not very many of us. And I would say there were probably around 100 or so food bloggers. And for the most part, we knew each other and we were all doing it for the same reason. We enjoyed cooking and we just wanted a fun way to document our recipes for family and friends. In my case, I was newly married and my husband Ben was in law school and I was working a very not fulfilling consulting job at the time. And so my blog was very much a creative outlet, and it was also a way for me to document the recipes that I was learning to cook for the two of us. I grew up in a family obsessed with food. My Grammy used to teach me to bake every single week during the summer. So even though I was a really accomplished baker, unfortunately, you cannot live on cake and muffins alone. So I needed to learn how to cook. And that is really where my blogging journey began. So some of my very earliest recipes were sharing the foods that I loved that my grandmothers made when I was growing up, but doing it in a healthier way. So I grew up in Kansas, very meat and potatoes. Like corn is a vegetable in my family and the only vegetable that everyone likes. And while it's wonderful to eat, those Midwest comfort foods every now and then, or, for holidays, I was really trying to cook for every day and be mindful of the nutritional value of what we were eating. And so I developed a passion for lightening up the recipes that I remember my grandmother's making without sacrificing the flavor. So the very first one I started with was my Grammy's famous chicken enchiladas. They are more sour cream, I think, than they are chicken. But I was playing around with the recipe and I thought, hey, I think I could use Greek yogurt. Or what if we worked in a few extra vegetables? Or how about I use whole wheat tortillas? And they were really good. And so I shared that recipe. A few friends made them. And I was like, wow, that was really fun. My friend's like, hey, do you have any more recipes? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I do. So that was really like what formed the heart of my blog, was finding ways to make foods more nutritious without sacrificing flavor, and then keeping that comforting touch that we all love. And that is one of the beautiful things that food can do, is bring those memories to us. And it proved to be very popular. So that was kind of how Well Plated began, and it has just grown exponentially since then.
Yeah, so you talk about, we talked previously before the pod that you were a self-taught cook. You didn't go to culinary school or anything like that. And you mentioned your grandmother a lot, and learning from her and cooking or watching her cook from a young age. What did your childhood smell like?
Well, honestly, on the weekend, it smelled a lot like Pillsbury cinnamon rolls. Those were a favorite for my sisters and I. No, just always having something in the oven. For dinner, we did a lot of, hamburger helper, casseroles, like very much like 90s Midwest home, but I feel like we always had something in the oven, whether it was something my mom or grandma was making from scratch, or it was something that my mom trusted my sisters and I to do on our own.
So when you first started the blog, you were talking about your husband being in law school, and I think your blog started out, it was called The Law Student's Wife, right?
It sure was. I really don't like to advertise that now just because it's so just I don't know that archaic is the right word, but like it kind of is. I mean, I literally that is how little thought was put into my blog. It was just something that I was starting for fun because I was newly married and entertaining myself when my husband was in law school and just kind of documenting my culinary journey along the way.
Is cringy the right word to describe the
Cringy.
first iterations of your blog there?
Oh, so much cringe. If you go in the Wayback Machine, like every now and then I'll send screenshots to my team just so they can see, like, guys, we've come a long way.
Well, it's like, when I first started this podcast, man, if you listen to my first episode, it's horrible. I mean, I didn't have any equipment. I was using my laptop camera and this cheap like headset mic. It sounded horrible, looked horrible, but it's always fun to kind of go back and see where you started. And it, I don't know, it makes you appreciate where you are now. Cause you look at, I was on the Well Plated blog today, just kind of looking at it. I was like, man, this could be your one-stop shop for any kind of healthy cooking, meal prepping that you want to do, and you don't have to go anywhere else. And to think of what the law student's wife has become, it's got to make you feel good, right?
For sure. I think the ultimate full circle moment was when my husband left his career as an attorney after 8 years to come work for me on Well
Oh wow,
Plated. That was just too funny. You know, the thing that I started because he was in law school ended up being both of our careers.
that's awesome. Is he your in-house counsel now? No, I'm just kidding.
He does. He does a little of this, a little of that. He this is kind of funny. The very first day he started for me, I was like, "Well, we need to come up with what do you want your title to be in your email signature?" And he's like, "How about CFO?" And I'm like, "You're not ready to be CFO yet." I was like, "You don't even know how we make money yet. You can't be CFO." Now I would say he is CFO among many other things.
That's funny. He's like, no, you're not ready for that promotion yet, sir.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull rank here. And also let's talk about the broken toilet. This is getting very messy.
That's funny. So this is your second cookbook. So your first one was called Well Plated, and this one's Well Plated Every Day.
Mhm.
What are the main differences between the first cookbook and the second cookbook? Like if someone has the first cookbook, what can they look forward to in the second cookbook that is a little bit different from maybe the first one that they
Mhm.
already have?
Well, if you have the first cookbook, you know that I, wherever possible, eliminate dishes. The ingredients are repeated across multiple recipes so that if you purchase something that you get the full use. I hate it if I buy a bag of a particular grain and then I use a quarter cup for a recipe and I never touch it again. My cookbooks
Mm,
are written such that, you really make the most of your ingredients and they're really easy to find. So you can expect more of the same in that regard. The biggest change that happened between my first and second cookbook, and I don't state this explicitly because I think we've heard enough about it, but was the pandemic. My first cookbook came out
mm,
in 2020, and we all found ourselves in a position where, like it or not, we had to cook every single day. And it was
mm-hmm.
just this really interesting juxtaposition for me between being tired of cooking as much as I adore it, but then also desperately missing cooking for people I love and being able to gather. So that was kind of what I had in mind, just as a part of what was embedded in my life as I was going in thinking about what I wanted to do for the second cookbook. And I realized I wanted recipes that were even easier and more flexible because what we really want is time at the table with other people, not necessarily time in the kitchen. So just streamlining them even more. And then I also really focused on big batch recipes that feel special enough to where I hope that, if you're making a big pan of the stacked butternut squash black bean enchiladas or the balsamic berry chicken thighs, that you'll call up your neighbor or your sister and say, "Hey, I'm making dinner. Why don't you come over?" Because you're making something that you're enjoying doing, you're not feeling stressed out, and you can just feel proud of the food that you're serving to company.
Yeah, you mentioned, when you get a cookbook and it has this like ingredient that you want to try for this one recipe, but it's not anywhere found in the rest of the recipes and you can't use it again. Was that one of the guiding principles of many, I'm sure, of developing this cookbook is getting people, because cooking healthy can be a challenge for some, and being able to find affordable healthy ingredients, I think is the key. So was one of the guiding principles like I want to make this cookbook accessible to people that you know don't have a Whole Foods budget, right? That go to Whole Foods and you spend your whole paycheck on some of the
Mhm.
ingredients. What were some of the other guiding principles of developing the second cookbook?
Mhm. So not only, was the affordability and the accessibility of the ingredients top of mind, I took it a step further and just thought about things that drive me crazy when I'm cooking and made sure that I eliminated as many of those as possible from my cookbook. So for example, my recipes will never call for half a can of beans. There is nothing more obnoxious than having a half of a can of black beans languishing in your refrigerator. They're not
Mm,
going to call for half of a bell pepper because like for me that those things always end up going bad. They're wasteful. It annoys me every single time that I look at my refrigerator and I see them sitting there. So wherever possible, I eliminated odd amounts of leftover ingredients and I think that helps a ton. I also am incredibly specific and consistent with the produce amounts throughout the book, which I'm going to be honest, the first book almost drove me to madness. But I know for people when they're starting to learn to cook, when you're an experienced cook and you see two medium carrots, you know that if you're a little over or a little under, unless it's, a carrot cake or something, if it's a stir fry, it's going to be fine. But when you're a newer cook, it can be really frustrating to say, well, like, what is medium? My grocery store has carrots that are the size of my forearm, and maybe like early farmers market carrots are really thin and delicate. So for every one of my produce items, it has a consistent weight, specific size that you need to chop it, and approximately how many of that number of produce that you need so that you can just feel really confident all the way through your cooking. That continuing confidence for me is just a guiding principle throughout every single part of my recipe. I really want you to feel like you're with a friend talking you through in the kitchen, and I don't want you to question yourself. So, for example, if you're making a cake batter and it curdles, I'm going to let you know it's going to curdle. It's totally fine. Because especially when you're just learning to cook, if you're making a recipe and it turns out at the end, that's great. But I never want to leave you feeling like, oh, but did I do it right and I just got lucky? Or did I do it wrong? And then fortunately it came out anyway. Like I want you to get to the end of making a recipe and feel like you owned every single step with confidence. Because at that point, it's not my cake anymore, it's your cake. And I just love being able to create that experience of success with every single one of my recipes.
So let's talk a little bit about behind the scenes of creating some of the recipes and creating this cookbook. I know because I cook a little bit at home, and just like you were saying, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you're fine if you're doing savory cooking or stir fries. You can be a little bit off on the measurements. If you're baking, you got to be a little bit more exact. Like for instance, my sister was trying to put together a family cookbook, and she asked me for a recipe. I sent her one, and she's like, "I need measurements. I need like, is it a half a cup? Is it a quarter cup?" I was like, "I don't know. It's just whatever tastes good." How difficult was it when you're creating like the blog and you're cooking for yourself, and then all of a sudden you got to put this down on paper? How difficult was it to create some of these healthy family recipes that you've probably done every day? And then, like what you're saying, a medium carrot. How difficult was that to translate into the cookbook, and like how long did it take to get it all down?
So my process of writing and testing recipes for a cookbook, I would say, is a minimum of 8 months. And it is just such a different experience walking into the kitchen and just cooking freely and creatively, which is, I think, what people romanticize writing a cookbook might be like. You've got your
Mhm.
glass of wine, you're just smelling things, kind of tossing stuff in. That's a fun way to cook for yourself on the weekend. But what I'm trying to do is create a recipe and make it in such a way that you can replicate it and have the same exact result in your kitchen. And something I'm really proud of is people will always say, I made my recipe, it looks exactly like yours did in the cookbook. And that is because I am maniacally precise with my measurements and instructions. So when I am starting to conceptualize a recipe, I'll spend an hour, hour and a half, maybe longer, depending on what it is, researching, reading a lot of inspiration, thinking about everything from, is this spice something that I know my readers usually have in their pantries, to how many measuring spoons am I requiring that this person is going to get dirty? Because if I can make the spices a teaspoon across the board and you're only having to use your 1 teaspoon, I'm going to do that. And so that, I write it all down meticulously, and then I print it out, take it into my kitchen with my marker, and I go through and I make sure that anytime I make any adjustment to the recipe, I'm measuring it precisely and noting it down. And I also know what feels natural and intuitive to me as I'm cooking. So for example, if, maybe in a perfect world, you would add salt at like 3 or 4 different times throughout the cooking process. Most people are in a hurry and they're making dinner and they're just going to look down and see 1 teaspoon salt. And it's way easier just to toss the teaspoon of salt all in together. So I look for the cues and the things that feel, where I find myself like getting into a flow with making the recipe, as much as I can kind of work that in to help make the process as smooth as possible. I do that. Then I go back, type in all my notes before I forget what I meant, or I get the paper any messier than it already is, because the paper is kind of a disaster by the end. And then the next time, like, I keep records of each recipe that I test. And so the next time I'll know, hey, this is take 2. This is what we changed last time. And then I'll follow the recipe again until I feel like the recipe is perfect. And then when I think the recipe is perfect, I send it to independent recipe testers along with a survey that asks them things such as, did the recipe take the amount of time that you thought it was going to take? Was there any part of the directions that were unclear? Did you have trouble accessing any of the ingredients? Were there any steps that made you pause and question yourself? And then, of course, was it delicious? Did your family love it? Would you make it again?
That's interesting. The independent recipe
Mm-hmm.
testers. I didn't envision that. I just thought you'd have this big dinner party with all your friends, and then
Oh, we
I'm
do
sure you
that
do
too. We
that.
call it, because for my cookbook, we test about 10. It's me and a good friend who I originally put out a call on Facebook that I needed someone just to come over and help wash dishes. And I was like, anyone who's available, in my local area, that would be fine. And then a good friend of mine responded as like, hey, actually, I might be interested. And she and I worked together side by side for hours and hours and hours doing both cookbooks. And I can't imagine writing it now without her help and input and just calming presence, shall we say. So we get it until we think like it's intuitive to the two of us, but then having that outside party is so helpful, because something that I thought was super clear, someone will ask a question and say like, well, I wasn't exactly sure. I thought you might mean this. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, it did never occur to me that you could interpret it that way, because, I was there in the moment and it was so obvious that is what we were supposed to do. So that feedback is invaluable. Like, it makes my recipes are better because of independent recipe testers. And I'm so grateful for the time of people that do that.
How do you find these independent recipe testers? You just put a call out like on social media, like, hey, I'm going to send who wants to test a recipe. I'm going to send you the recipe card or whatever, and test it out and give me some feedback. Like, I don't remember seeing a LinkedIn ad for that. So how do you find that?
So that tends to happen. That happens a little more organically. So I'll start with, some family and friends, and that has actually been really great too. It's been a fun way to keep in touch with, say, friends from college that I don't see regularly. We'll stay in touch because they'll help, they'll send me feedback on a recipe and then say, hey, here's a picture of my daughter and stuff like that. I also, over the years, have had readers volunteer. So if people are interested, I do have quite a few people, because this process is something I talk about a lot with my audience. And if people reach out, I'm happy to add them to that as well.
That's cool. That's cool. And so you're talking about the independent recipe testers. I'm sure they're a lot more honest than, say, doing a little dinner party for your friends and your family, because your friends and family, they're going to be nice, right? I mean, even when I ask my friends' family, hey, what'd you think of my podcast? They're always really nice. And then you get to the comments section on YouTube, and they're the real ones that are telling you like how it really is. So speaking of never reading the comments in social media, how has the feedback been from this second cookbook? It launched in October. It's out in the wild now, and I'm sure you've had some reviews on Amazon. How has the feedback been? And how much of that you're like, oh wow, that was that was right. That person really kind of understood what I was going for. And then how many of the responses you get that was like, oh man, reading that just made my day.
They have been overwhelmingly positive. Like, and it just feels so good. I honestly didn't think that I was going to write a second book. I gave so much of myself to my first book. I thought it had all of my best ideas, all of my best stories. So to hear people say that they love my second book just as much as they do my first one, just like touches something deep within me, because that was such a big insecurity that I had. Like, I was very proud of the book. I'm so proud of both of my books, but that was something that I knew was holding me back because the first book was so successful. I was like, I thought like, well, maybe I can't do it again. And so to see it be loved by people means the world.
It's like birthing a child, right? You have your first kid and you're like, I swear I'm not going to have another kid. Then you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to have another one. And that's so,
Yeah.
whenever I talk to people that have created cookbooks, I have some friends that, former Top Chef contestants that created cookbooks. I'm like, man, what was that like? It's like, it was like giving birth to a child. Because it's like you were saying, it's all of your being, it's all of who you are in between these pages. You're like, and you can't think of another scenario where you can do that again. But you find a way to get it done, and you find new recipes or variations of recipes, or like, and then that gets the wheels turning. It gets the creativity juices flowing again, and then out comes a second cookbook. So, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
So the cookbook is about healthy eating, healthy recipes. In reality, though, in your house, in your kitchen, what are your kind of daily cooking habits and go-to recipes during the week?
hmm So number one, I love leftovers. I'm the queen of leftovers. I think they are the best overs. I don't, I know some people are a little leftover shy. Like, we're a household of two, but all my recipes are designed for 4 to 6 people. So honestly, a lot of the time we're having just leftovers of what I'm making for well plated. It actually makes my husband kind of sad because he'll have something he really loves. And I'm like, well, enjoy it now because you're never going to eat it again, because I'm always moving on to testing the next thing. I do a little bit of light meal prep, which for me is making like a big batch of protein at the beginning of the week. And then I roast huge sheet pans of roasted vegetables so that we can just reheat them in the toaster oven or the air fryer. And then, immediately you just have a healthy side. It makes getting vegetables super easy. When I don't have something prepped, or say it's a week where I'm doing a lot of muffins and desserts, or maybe like a salad or something that doesn't feel quite as satisfying for dinner, my go-to is usually some form of bone and skin on chicken thighs, like simple chicken sheet pan meals. It just always hits the spot. It takes very little prep, and if I have time, I can salt the chicken ahead of time during the day so that all I have to do is throw it into the oven at dinner time.
So it's Saturday night in your house, and you're thinking to yourself, if I eat one more kale leaf, I might go crazy. What do you indulge in that, may not be a little less, it may be a little less healthy than you're used to cooking? What's the one thing that just scratches that itch of like cheat day?
I don't use the word cheat day, I will say, because I feel like you should be able to enjoy the pleasures in life any day, just within moderation. And so for us, we will do a mini charcuterie board a couple of nights a week just because it's fun. And I do all the cooking. My husband does most of the dishwashing. So we have a good symbiotic relationship there. And he always will hang out in the kitchen with me while I'm cooking. So for us, that's just like a really fun time to wind down, have a glass of wine, chat while I work on dinner. In terms of like dinner favorite meal, I just love doing homemade pizza night. We actually did that last night. I got a little out of control. I made 4 different pizzas. And
Wow.
so just getting to play around with that and being like, you know what, we're not having a salad. Like, I had the best intentions to serve that pizza with a salad. And then I was like, I think we're just going to have pizza. And that's great.
So this cookbook, as we discussed before, meant for ease of use, to be able to cook a healthy, fulfilling meal on a Tuesday night. What advice would you give to a home cook, an amateur home cook, to try to maintain this balance of making these meals, somewhat every day? I know sometimes when I get a new cookbook, I get real excited. I want to read through everything and I want to cook everything. But then by around Wednesday, I'm like, ugh, I'm just going to order a pizza. So what advice
Mhm.
would you give somebody like me that's like, all right, keep going. You're doing great.
I think something that I think really helps is to pick out your recipes early in the week and then order the groceries, because then you're kind of committed. Once those groceries are sitting in your refrigerator, it's like, okay, I have a plan. I think part of what is so exhausting about dinner is coming up with what to make. So if you decide that on the weekend, or sometime in the week where you still have a little bit more energy, I think that makes it a lot easier. I'll also say you don't need to cook every single night of the week. Like, I adore cooking. I don't cook every single night of the week. Don't be afraid to lean into those leftovers, and then also don't be afraid to take store-bought shortcuts. So, for example, like, if you're having an easy pasta, if you're like, okay, well, I'm going to cook on Monday, and then, say Monday you make a big batch of meatballs, and then, Wednesday you're going to have those leftover meatballs with some pasta sauce. Maybe on Monday we're going to serve that as meatball subs, and then Wednesday you're just going to cook some noodles to throw with it. If you made the meatballs, you don't have to make the sauce. Like, it's fine to buy homemade or to buy jarred marinara sauce. It's fine to buy ready-made pizza dough or ready-made salad dressing. Like, you don't need to do everything 100% to have a nutritious, delicious, and well-rounded diet. So don't, I feel like we start out the year and we think like, oh, okay, I'm going to cook more and I'm going to make every single thing myself from scratch. I'm going to make my own bread, and I'm going to always do my own marinating, and I'm going to make my own chicken stock. Like, that is very, very overwhelming. Like, I dream about doing that kind of thing when I'm retired, but like, I don't have time to make my own chicken stock. I just like, that's just something I've had to let go. So I think
Yeah.
like just giving yourself a break is really important too.
Yeah. Keeping things realistic, right? I think is the key.
Exactly.
Everybody gets excited buying the bright new shiny cookbook, and then you start actually doing the thing, and it's like, oh well, yeah. Planning, I think, is key. I like what you were saying about
Hmm.
planning on the weekend or whenever your days off are during the week, planning your week's menu, getting the groceries, see what you have in your cabinet to begin with, and then trying to match them up with the recipes that
Hmm.
that are that are in the book.
Hmm.
So,
Or just,
oh,
just try one new recipe a week. Say I'm going to cook
yeah.
one new recipe a week, and then the rest of the week I'm just going to do really easy, your chicken thighs, pasta, just stuff that's super simple that like almost don't even need a recipe for.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. So, what's the future look like for Well Plated? You got this. They got the second cookbook. It's out there. A third cookbook, I'm sure. I don't know, but what's the future for Well Plated? What's it look like?
I'm just so excited about the team that we have in place and the different services that lets us offer our readers. So, for example, we were able to launch meal plans. That was never something that I could have done on my own. Now we offer a free meal plan every single week, and we're starting to expand into doing, 30-minute versions, slow cooker version, low carb, just like really trying to hit on the different needs that people have and figure out how to organize the site. Even it's already very well organized, but I'm constantly thinking, how do I make it even better for someone to get to the information that they need as quickly as possible? So right now we're just really focused on making our content more accessible and helping people just get through their busy weeks by giving them the recipes they need kind of in real time.
Yeah, the website. I was going through it, in researching you, and that website is great. It is so well organized. You have different sections for, like you were saying, for slow cookers. I'm a big fan of using a crock pot. You throw everything in there, turn it on, and you have
Mhm.
dinner when you get home. You start it in the morning, you have dinner when you get home. It's just so well organized, and almost gives you no excuse to not at least try it, because you search around long enough, you're gonna find something in there that I think will speak to you as a home cook. And then you try it. And you try one, and you're like, oh, I think I can do this. And you try it again, and I think the recipes look really great. Recipes are a huge thing on Instagram and TikTok and on the internet. And I've tried a couple from different places, and then I eat it, and I'm like, something went horribly wrong and there's a step missing or something. But yours is very well organized. And I think a lot of people can learn to be a better cook just by going through the website and just exploring around. So congratulations on Well Plated Every Day. It's a huge success of the cookbook. And I think a lot of people are going to get a lot of things out of it. Where can people find you on socials? Where can people find the cookbook? I just want to roll out the red carpet. Any future projects you want to promote or anything? Just take a few minutes and tell the listeners about that.
Oh, well, thanks so much. So I am at Well Plated on all of the socials. I spend the most of my time on Instagram, but we're also on TikTok, Pinterest, Facebook, just really trying to make our content as accessible everywhere as we can be. One service that we offer that is unique to Well Plated, and it makes me so excited. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to share it. But we actually have the ability to create a free account at wellplated.com where you can save all of your recipes to your recipe box. Like, I think it's something interesting that we all took away from the TikTok outage, and a lot of people freaked out because
Oh,
they had
yeah.
lost all of their recipes that they had saved. And I just think it's important to remember that, like, we don't own the social platform. So being able to save your recipes in one place that you have always, or if you're at the grocery store and you're like, shoot, like I forgot, to write down the link to that recipe, or I can't remember what it was that I picked out. With a free account, you can access all of your saved favorite recipes, and you can actually save entire meal plans as well and customize the meal plans by swapping out different recipes. You can just remove some recipes if you don't want all 5 of the dinners we're suggesting, and you can generate a shopping list too. So, and that's all completely free. We're really proud to be able to offer it.
Wow. So what we were saying before is a one-stop shop. You can create a shopping list that you can go to the grocery store, order your groceries, have them delivered, have an online recipe box. Yeah, that TikTok outage, that was a rough 12 hours for some of us.
Yeah, world almost ended.
Well, that's awesome. And people can find the book on Amazon, I'm guessing, right?
Yep. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, your local books, ask for it at your local bookstore first. It's often available, and that's a great way to support local too.
Yeah, local bookstores are great. So I just want to thank you, Erin, for the time, for being on the pod and talking about your cookbook. Folks, if you like this podcast, I encourage you to leave a 5-star review or like and follow if you're not already, at Rich Herrera, at Eat Your Content on socials and anywhere you get your podcast. Erin, thank you so much for your time. Good luck to all the future projects. Definitely going to play around with the website a little bit more and start saving some recipes on there and sharpen my chef's knife. So.
Well, that just makes me so happy. Thank you again so much for having me.